Hi, and welcome to ICS Arabia podcast. Today's guest is a cyber physical risk expert. He's been in the domain for, for OT security and OT in general. He's been there for almost over 45 years. I'm really glad to have him here in my podcast. Sinclair, Mr. Sinclair. Hi, how you doing?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I'm fine. I'm fine. It's
Nice. Really pleasure to have you.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
nice to be here.
you are
It's
like a mentor to many of the people who works in the OT world.
yeah,
And
I don't know that. I'm not, I my character is not really mentoring, so
okay, well, they say about you that you mentor them. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
heard three people who said you mentor them. Like
It's
so.
not my talent, but I try.
Okay. Um, it's really, really pleasure to have him here, and we'd like to learn from him about this domain and how this domain started, how OT cybersecurity started. But before we dig into that, we'd like to know about you, Sinclair, and could you tell us about your story and why you chose this field or this job?
Oh, that's a long story, of course. You already mentioned 45 years, but I started I started I worked for 43 years for Honeywell, so that's a very long time.
Oh, wow.
And before that, I had another employer, uh, and then I did robotics for packaging systems for 2 years, so 45 years in automation, I guess. But the most interesting part, of course, is starting with the Honeywell area because that's the process industry I focus on still today. You mentioned 45 years OT security. That's not really true because
Uh,
in those days,
yeah.
early days, we never thought about security.
It's called the process automation system, right?
Yeah, yeah. When I started, security was not on our minds. Yeah, the functionality was number one. And I don't know if you looked into the history of DCS, but Honeywell, together with Yokogawa, they were really be discussing who was first. But they invented DCS in 75, 76 period. And I started Honeywell in 1980. So in the very early phases of when customers were going over from panel instrumentation to screen-based control. Yeah, well, that basically started all the computerized control. And I started in the process computers. So the bigger computers, mainframe computers overseeing DCS systems. And the early DCS systems didn't provide much functionality. They were giving you a view on the process, but things like graphic displays, for that you needed to go to the process computers. All kind of reporting mechanisms would be in the process computers. So, and that was my world. But of course, I've also learned in those days, was trained on TDC 2000, which was the early DCS system. And yeah, so I started with both hardware and software. I was trained, it's almost in today's context impossible, but I was trained for 9 months. Today's companies are fighting when you want to have a 3-day training. But when I came with Honeywell, they looked it over for a month, I guess. And then they sent me to the US for training. And that was in May, and I returned February year after. Learning all kind of stuff on the hardware of the process computers, the software of the process computers, and that's kind of started my career. It's in field service and also later on some engineering jobs. I did that, well, I guess till the end of the 90s. Still nothing to do with cybersecurity in those days, not even networking. There was all kind of fixed proprietary environment. I think in the late 90s, switches were not even invented. I think that's something, Cisco switches, I think 98, 99 or something like that. Before that, Ethernet looked totally different. And then we had this famous year 2000 problem. You might have heard of it.
Yeah.
This clock thing where everyone was afraid that also industrial systems would crash. So I was involved in that in testing, that for sites going over the period, and after that I needed to do something else. So I suggested let's start a network team, and from there network became security, and yeah, and then up to today, I guess. I'm not working anymore for Honeywell. I retired 1.5 years ago. I still do things. I have small consultancy jobs, and I give training and writing a book, all that type of stuff. But yeah, I think I've been in OT security from day one. Basically, when the proprietary systems evolved into the early open technology using Windows and even earlier the Unix environment. But the cyber focus, I think that started after 2000. And even the real cyber focus started after 2010. I think the Stuxnet issue woke up a lot of companies on the importance.
So
Though big companies always worked on it. Companies, the large oil companies already worked on policies on cyber well, since 2003, 2004 type of time frame.
So when you started in with Honeywell early 80s, was it in Netherlands? They were in Netherlands or somewhere else?
Yeah, I started in Netherlands,
Netherlands, yeah.
and but the Netherlands always played kind of a important role in larger projects too.
Oh,
So we were also in projects. I already, well, my first time I visited Saudi Arabia, for example, was
wow.
1982. Different world, also different Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, of course. Long
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, 1982, I was 9 years old. So
Wow.
nice. I mean, while I was reading your article in your blog, you said you don't like the word industrial control system, and you prefer the word process automation system. This is quite different than what the community normally.
Yeah, yeah, but I like to focus a little bit on a particular task. If you
Uh,
say industrial control system,
yeah.
there are a lot of systems around it
Uh-huh.
that are industrial and yeah, control things. And I focus specifically on those things that automate the production process, that want to well, run a chemical plant, a refinery, an offshore platform, or things like that. But if you go to a parking garage, there's also, of course, kind of industrial control system there for opening and closing the entrance. So, but I'm not focusing on that.
I see.
ICS is a very, very, very wide world, a very big environment. And process automation, for me, then I focus on the things I
So
know something about. And
did you choose to become an engineer, or why you chose it? Did you like it, or did you hear about it, or
well, I had to do something. No,
yeah.
well, you have to go back to my very early days as a kid. You know, you had all kind of electronic, yeah, stuff you could play with. I always liked that, so that's why I entered into the yeah technical job.
I see.
And after doing my regular schooling and my regular training, also in the evening, I did all kind of education to further, yeah, enhance my knowledge and widen my knowledge. But I think technical is very nice. I,
You don't regret now. You think you made the right decision?
yeah, yeah. I don't see. Okay, it's not for all of you viewers. It's not a job where you get very rich. You better go in business, in commerce,
I see.
and things like that if you want to be rich or work for a bank in the stock exchange. But it's very interesting because you continuously challenge with
Mm.
new things. You continuously learn. It's not a job where you can start, learn something, and then freewheel the next 40, 50 years to the end of your career.
Uh,
You need to keep,
Keep up to date, huh?
yeah, you need to keep focused and learn new things. And
Well,
lots of things happened in that period, in those 45 years.
yeah, I mean, that's why I'm interviewing you because you've watched how OT or process automation system has evolved over 45 years and how the cybersecurity got involved. You said in 2010, right?
That was the big jump.
Yeah,
Of
the
course,
big jump.
before that period, also
Hmm.
people knew there wasn't a problem, but
Oh,
a lot of people said, well, it never happened, or
did did you see any attacks, incidents happened before, like cyber attacks?
before 2010, you mean, or in general?
No, in general, I mean, from your experience, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen
uh,
cases where cyber attacks were launched or malware were
hmm.
spread.
In the
That always,
90s.
but I've never seen a successful case.
Oh, okay.
Apart from the malware, I've seen infected systems. But
In fact, since the 90s or 2001, like
yeah, that is all in the 2000 years.
2000. Okay, malware. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. And so Stuxnet was the alarm that made the companies.
Yeah, it
Was it
opened a lot of eyes, I guess.
okay? And how about Honeywell? When did it become interested in cybersecurity? Since that
In
time?
about yeah, that's a bit hard for me to oversee
Hmm.
because Honeywell is global, of course, and
Yeah.
originally my focus was Netherlands and then Northern Europe, then
I
Europe,
see.
and only later on global. But
Hmm.
I think if you it more or less happened globally the same period around the change of the century
Hmm.
when yeah, bigger networks. For Honeywell, you know Honeywell, if you know a little bit about their products, they had something called TDC 2000. That is a product end 70s till early 80s. And then they moved to TDC 3000. And they were all proprietary technology. So cyber didn't play a big role. Even networks didn't play a big role because everything was standardized and easy to implement. And then we moved into the open technology, and then we suddenly had Ethernet and routing, and the networks grew, and connectivity became bigger and bigger.
Oh,
So at that point in time, there was a need for people focusing on networks that knew something about switches, routing, and all that type of stuff. And yeah, when you enter networks in the early days, you automatically also entered security. That
of course.
kind of evolved from one into the other.
Yeah.
So,
And were you involved in the network or no?
yeah, in my initial days, I was involved in the networks and I did all my Cisco certifications and and,
Okay. So they
and
get.
yeah, but okay, when you grow older, you become less specific. You become more generic in the things you
Uh,
do. So I grew a little bit out of that, and my last 10 years, I had a lot of focus on risk
Yeah.
and
Well,
not so much anymore on the technical details on how to configure a firewall and how to configure a
uh,
switch and a router. And
but you did before you were interested in those.
initially, yeah,
Yeah,
initially I
well,
also had to do the hard work.
so it's a normal cycle. It's a normal cycle.
Yeah.
Once you get a bit more experience, you move on from details to.
But some details I never learned. My certification ended, for example, in the Windows environment on Windows NT.
Oh, I remember it. Yeah.
So I would not be able to install a Microsoft domain today.
Okay.
But in the early days, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So let's move to risk because you are known for being having expertise in risk, and you always talk about risk, write about risk. And I saw you have some certifications about risk. Why are you interested in this topic? Why you care about risk? When did you get interested in it?
Well, yeah, that's very pragmatic, maybe. I got really interested in a stupid way, maybe, but that is because a Middle East customer of us asked us to do a risk assessment. And we didn't have that in the portfolio at that time. And he also specified that he wanted to have kind of semi-quantitative risk because he wanted to compare it with his process safety results. And that's basically when it started. And then when we said, okay, we're willing to do that, we'll give it a try. And then we developed it from there, basically. And actually, I think, well, risk for me, the way I look at it now, and it's maybe a little bit subjective, but I think everything starts with risk. Cybersecurity starts with risk. In the early days, that was not the case. In the early days, people were asking install a firewall or install, yeah, a particular monitoring system or a SIEM or whatever. But it was kind of focused on specific technical things. While I believe you should only do that when the risk demands you to do it. You have to mitigate your risk and you have to select the proper controls to do that. And in the early days, it was much more technical focus. And the moment you start focusing on risk, it becomes much more business focused. You also get away a little bit from all the network and Microsoft technology and go back to the process technology. And that's the interesting part of me. Also, of course, because of my history in that world. Yeah, for me, cyber physical risk is, yeah, it's very interesting area. A lot of things to learn. Also because it's developing. There is if you go back to theoretical stuff, then there's still a lot to learn. I also looked into and studied process safety a lot, and I saw a little bit of history of LOPA, which is layers of protection analysis in process safety, which is also a semi-quantitative risk model. And if you go back all the way to 20 years, 25 years, when that was starting to be developed, you see the similar discussions that we now have with semi-quantitative cyber-physical risk. People claiming that you do not have enough data and all that type of arguments. And not always, some are valid and others are not valid, but you see the same discussions and the same questions in cyber, which were in process safety 20, 25 years ago. So there's kind of a gap to bridge. I personally also think that process safety is much more mature than today's cybersecurity or OT security.
Interesting. But don't you think risk is a bit subjective topic? Because there are always methods, too many methods. Everybody brings his own framework, his own opinion.
Yeah, it's very subjective the moment you do it qualitative,
Qualitative, yeah, that's
then
it.
it's by definition subjective. Even if you have to score something, this is high or medium or low, then it's never sure what high, medium, and low means. That can be something totally different for you than for me.
Mm.
That's game score. But when you do start doing it quantitatively, semi-quantitatively, you try to make it more objective. At least you use methodologies that do not allow you to steer the risk in a certain direction.
Mm.
So your subjectivity is kind of removed. But of course, there are other questions, and how do you comment data? How do you do it? And that, but that's the interesting part. Where I differ a lot from, for example, the ISA 62443 32, the document on risk. But it's also a learning process. Initially, I was 90%, 99% in line with that document, and I would say now, well, if I'm 60% in line, it's high. It's,
So, what do you think about the current standards? I mean, when they talk about risk, and do you agree with them? Do you find them useful
I
for
don't think there
assessment?
is a
Mm.
current standard that much.
Ah,
For me, and that's maybe if I go back to process safety,
mm,
that is the most critical part in an industrial process. Specifically, if you talk about a chemical plant or a refinery, things that happen can have immediate consequence to life and environment. And process safety is really focusing on that and quantifying the risk for that. And I believe that cybersecurity, cyber attacks can do exactly the same what process safety random accidents can do. So you need to treat them the same. And I believe more you need kind of a unified risk assessment where you extend process safety risk assessment to include cyber physical risk so that you have a total picture. In the end, it sounds maybe harsh, but if you're dying from an explosion because of a random failure in equipment, or you're dying from an explosion because of a cyber attack, that doesn't make a difference. The result is the same, and so your security, your safeguards should be the same. And in today's threat landscape, we should consider cyber attacks as a serious
mm,
attempt to cause very serious damage. Specifically for me, I don't want to say eye opener, but a big change was the Trisis attack in also in Saudi Arabia, where actually organizations put a lot of effort in developing an attack that could manipulate a safety controller. And the moment you manipulate safety controllers, you play with life. So people are interested in that. And then you have to consider that. It's not in the days before that, I had something, okay, you attack the control system, the safety system will save you the day. If things get out of hand, the safety system will bring it in a safe state.
mm.
But that's no longer true. And that's why I think cyber physical risk should be considered just as important as process safety risk. It's kind of one and the same because the consequences are the same.
So, so you think because some engineers say they rely on safety systems that even if you do cyber attacks, the process won't be affected. So what happens?
Originally many people were thinking that.
So you think
Originally people were thinking the safety system will save us.
mm,
But That's no longer true when you consider that also safety systems can be attacked and can be
Yeah.
manipulated. Of course, it is not that easy, and it requires a lot of expertise and knowledge to do that and to plan it. But apparently, there are organizations investing money in it to develop that type of attack. And
Mm.
okay, the first time they failed on the Tricon X,
Yeah.
but okay, that's a learning process.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that is dangerous, and that's why I believe I personally see a lot of focus on security from the technical IT OT sides very often in companies. But for me, the focus should be from the process safety side. They should be interested because this cyber scenarios can do exactly the same thing as what a random failure, and they can do more. There are a lot of scenarios ignored by process safety because from
Mm.
a random failure perspective, they're very unlikely to happen. It's very unlikely that a particular failure happens in a specific sequence or even simultaneously. The likelihood that this and this and this happens is almost zero, so we ignore it in our analysis. But in a safety in a cyber attack, yeah, you design it to happen in a specific sequence, in a specific simultaneous occurrence. And those scenarios should also be looked at and considered if, yeah, how high the risk is.
Okay. So this is like so we can call it a myth then, that safety systems protect you. Can we say that or
Yeah, yeah.
it's an
That's
old
not
myth?
true.
Huh?
Well, it's partly true because
Oh.
if you look at safety barriers, part is digital, the functional safety part, but there is also, of course, mechanical
Oh.
parts, and they will act,
Mm.
but they're not always there, number one. And then in safety, you have multiple safety barriers operating often in parallel to
Mm.
reach specific reliability. And yeah, if you no longer can rely on your safety instrumented system, your digital part, then your risk equations are not the same anymore. It's while the risk criteria they remain the same. I mean, it depends a bit on the region, the country, how high they are, but there are specific criteria on how often you can have a fatal fatality in a process, how many events per annum are allowed. Typically once every 100,000 years or once every million years even. And that doesn't change. So if the cyber part is entering that equation, then you have to look at that and you have to see if your cybersecurity is sufficiently secured, let me say it like that you still meet those risk criteria. And that's kind of revolutionary. And not everyone accepts that I say that you have the same risk criteria for cyber physical risk as you have for process safety risk. Some say, yeah, you cannot do that. But on the other hand, if you look at from the regulator part, I don't know how that is in the Middle East, because every country has different rules. But for environmental impact and for human safety, governments specify specific risk criteria plants have to meet if they want to operate in their area.
Mm.
And yeah, that is based on consequence and impact and not on the cause. So if the cause is a cyber attack or the cause is a stupid random failure of a piece of equipment, that doesn't make a difference.
Oh, I see. So what about the other claim that our network is air gapped? Do you think it's still valid, or do you think it's true? Air gap.
I think air gapping
Mm.
reduces attack surface in principle.
Mm.
So it improves, how you say that, it makes the hurdle for the attacker a little bit bigger.
Mm.
But if you look at, well, the Stuxnet, one of the most famous attacks in our world, that was an air-gapped system. So technically, it's still possible. And there are, of course, always a lot of exchange of data. You need to upgrade things, you need to update things. So there's always data exchange, even if you're not network connected. And a really advanced attacker, yeah, he can probably still do what he wants to do. But of course, if you're not connected, you are free of all kind of stupid errors that can occur. But not, yeah, it's not the answer to your problem. It's not like we disconnect the firewall
Mm.
and we have no problem anymore. That's not the case.
What do you think of the new technologies that's coming and some OT vendors starting to implement it, like cloud and IIoT, etc.
Yeah, and autonomous systems. You also have those nowadays. Yeah, that's very interesting. It gives, but actually, all those new technologies kind of increase the attack surface.
Mhm.
Also, change the type of attacks, a new type of attacks. I mean, if you have something AI controlled, then how that AI is trained becomes very important. And if you somehow have influence on that type of training, you can influence the decision made also. So there's always kind of manipulation possible. It makes it also again a new world, but it doesn't make it more secure. It's
Yeah.
I think IIoT. I often talk about IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things. Internet of Things for me is what I got here at home, and an Industrial Internet of Things is what I install in the plant. And yeah, that increases the attack surface because you have to bring that signal out. You bring it to the cloud somewhere where they make nice calculations and come up with new improved control strategies, which you have to download again. And you can, of course, always manipulate the data and do something. Not easy, again, but you have to keep account, of it. You have to consider it. And when you talk about risk, you always try to look into the future, not in what's happening now, but what could happen. And yeah, and so you also have to consider what we call non-events, things that never happen but are possible, and to see how likely they are. Some non-events are absolutely very unlikely to happen, but some become more and more likely.
Yeah. So I read that you have an academy. It's called Cyber Physical Risk Academy.
Yeah, sounds very big, huh?
Well, must be
But
big because you're the guy behind it. So.
yeah, both the CEO and the trainer and the guy taking care of the kitchen are all united in one in
Uh,
one person. I needed a name.
yeah.
The moment you start working as a independently, your Gmail address is very often not allowed. So yeah, I thought, okay, let's create.
You booked the domain name.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm not focusing on making big money out of it. I do training. I have given training courses. I do consultancy,
So
but it's more or less to stay active and not to
good.
only on the grass.
What do you train? What subjects do you train?
Only cyber physical risk.
Only
That is
risk.
my only thing. Yeah, there are other things I've done in the past, other things I've looked at, incident response, incident
Oh, okay.
things like that, but I don't want to do that. I want to focus a little bit. And And actually, I don't want to work that much. Yeah. It's for me more keeping busy than becoming tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Do you do it online or do you do it on premise or
no. So far, I've done it always on site.
on site?
Yeah.
Nice. Is it just one course or you have multiple courses on risk?
Well, I have two versions of the same. I give what we call the masterclass cyber physical risk,
Mm,
and I have the 3-day version that goes into detail,
mm.
and I have the 1-day version that goes quickly over the main topics, and
I see.
it's
So you do it mainly in Netherlands.
no, actually, I have done it only once in the Netherlands. The others were all abroad in Europe.
Ah, so you travel, huh? Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
nice. Ooh. Also, I heard you have a book. It's called Deep Defense, right?
Yeah, that's the work title. It's I don't have the book. Yeah, I'm working on a book.
So-
I'm trying to finish it. I'm sometimes it goes fast, sometimes it goes very, very slow.
Mm,
I'm struggling a little bit with it. Uh, it's a book about basically about cyber physical risk,
mm,
but then from a deep defense perspective. And with that, I don't mean defense in depth with that, what some people think, but
mm,
deep defense is for me that you have to have a holistic approach to risk and consider all the organizational parts that play a role in your security. And that can be your senior management, that can be your HR department, that can be your procurement department. There's a lot of different organizations play a role in your cyber physical risk management, and not only the technical guys.
mm. Nice. So when do you expect to finish it? Next year, this year?
I have made many, many promises. I've set a promise to my publisher that I would finish it end this year, which
Mm,
is getting very close. And yes, I have the text, but the problem is
mm,
to make a consistent book. First of all, if you write it over a longer time and you add a section on something, then you might, hey, maybe I should change the earlier section
mm.
to make it better aligned. And sometimes I'm also I have a big personal vulnerability. Let me say it like that.
Okay.
In that I'm very often seeking detail, and
Mm,
that is not always a good way, a good thing. If you create too much text, no one will read it. So you have to focus sometimes a little bit, not telling everything, skipping things, and then you keep typing, writing stuff, and throwing away stuff, and so that is a little bit how progress goes. And hopefully you write more than you throw away, but sometimes it it is equivalent.
okay. So you said now there's a book coming and you have courses now. What else you do in the industry? Do you go visit factories, give them consultation, any services? You do that or?
I have I cannot give names, but I have developed in a work group very
Right.
specific audit process for cyber physical risk.
Okay.
And well, we finished that part and we do now kind of a follow-up part for that same organization. And so that's, yeah, kind of a low intensity consultancy job.
Hmm.
A couple of days per month, you're really focusing on that and working on it, but it's not like a 40 or 80 hour a week type of stuff. And I work for the ISA 84 group and the TR 84 technical report. In
Nice.
that work group, I participate. And we issued a paper last year on technical on risk. Let me say it like that. And risk in combination with process safety. The ISA 84 team is the team that focuses on safety, on process safety. ISA 99 makes the cybersecurity spec, and ISA 84 looks on how to do that very specifically for the process industry and the safety environment. And that's my interest. The combination safety, cybersecurity is for me, the key.
In one of your articles, you said there are three roles in the process automation system. One of them is the process engineer, and the other one, the architect, right? And the control engineer, right? Maybe I'm.
Yeah, well, titles are a little bit hard. It depends
Yeah.
on the company what the job does. But you have people that work on automation. You have people that work on
Yeah.
the chemical side of the process. Let me say it like that. They understand
Hmm.
exactly how a boiler works and how a distillation column works. And you have people
Yeah.
doing the technical.
And you mentioned that there is the risk analyst role as well.
Yeah,
Top,
yeah,
on top of those three.
yeah. Most companies don't have it. Only the larger companies have it.
Hmm.
Very often, the risk analyst in the larger companies is not focusing on the level of detail I try to focus on.
Oh.
The level of detail I focus on is typically done by the process safety engineers.
So, I mean, for those three roles, you recommend that company, if it's capable, to have those three roles, and the risk analyst, of course, right? You advise that.
I think they have them all, but
Huh.
already today,
Mm.
but very often sometimes in the same person, and that's fine. I mean, that depends a little bit on how big a company is. For me, anything with risk is kind of a team item. It, you cannot have a single person overseeing everything. It's a team effort.
I see.
Team effort for people understanding the automation system, people understanding process safety, people understanding security, people understanding network. It is a team effort. And you can learn a little bit. The longer you are in the business, the bigger your scope becomes.
Mm.
But typically, yeah, it remains a team effort because there's a lot of specialisms in there.
So they should have people who do cybersecurity or understand cybersecurity
Yeah,
with the team. It's recommended. It's recommended, right?
yeah, yeah. I don't think you can ignore nowadays cybersecurity. You of course hire it outside,
Mm.
but if you are big enough, you should preferably have those people in your organization.
And should these security people be engineers, or doesn't matter? I mean, should they understand the process, like process engineers, or they should be major in computer science, and that's fine.
Depends on what they do. I mean, if you talk about risk,
Mm.
you don't need technical detail. Of course, you always need to be a technical person, I think, because it's a technical process we work in.
Mm.
But the moment you start about talking about risk, you increase the kind of the area you overlook. And when you talk about network security, you focus very much on one specific item. And then you have to know on how to implement segmentation, how to configure your firewalls, and even how to configure a domain and what kind of stuff is in there. But there's a lot of settings in an automation system. There are also a lot of settings in the control side that pure network engineers don't know about. There are all kind of read-write protections in process automation systems that, yeah, need to have the right settings to secure your process from being modified.
Yeah. So, what's your advice for people who want to enter OT cybersecurity, let's say, because this is my area where I focus on. I mean, should they study engineering or should they just have computer courses and then study OT? What's your advice? What's your view?
Yeah, I think both is possible. It
Uh,
all depends on how you are, how you build up your experience the moment you start working. I think when you come from school, you have a lot of knowledge, you have a lot of things you know, but you have almost zero practice, zero experience.
hmm,
So you have to learn a lot, and that is best done hands-on. So I think if you really want to know something about OT security and cyber physical risk, the best places to start are either work for an asset owner, work for an EPC, or work for a main automation contractor like I did for Honeywell, but Yokogawa or Amazon or ABB would be equivalent choices. Then you actually learn on projects on what's important and how to do it. It's if you go to immediately to a pure consultancy company, then I don't think you have enough hands-on exposure. Of course, those companies, the big companies, big consultancy companies, they also are active in the OT world. But now my experience and also talking to some former colleagues that went to that type of company, they actually not always fully aware of what the technology demands.
there is also one kind of people that nobody talks about. I'd like to bring it to you. There are academic people nowadays. You can see them at the universities. You know, PhDs. They do research on, and some of them work at companies. They do research on OT vulnerabilities, solutions, software, whatever. What do you think of these people?
Oh,
This track.
I value that very much because it's very
Yeah.
often the source of my my information.
Right.
You need people that look at it from a theoretical and a bigger overview. In the end, everything needs to fit a certain structure, but that is not the way things start.
Mm,
Very often things start very ad hoc and very random. Also, if you look in our industry,
mm,
there was very few structure in about 20 years ago.
mm,
And then when you mature in that industry, when you learn, you feel the need for structure, and then you basically build upon the work that those people are doing.
because I myself, I did the research on OT cybersecurity when I was at college, so I have academic background as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I saw that. I saw that.
yeah, um,
No, it's important. It's important,
yeah,
but still, the theory always needs to be confronted
yep.
with the hands-on technical problems.
Agree, fully agree. Have you? Do you know
It's a kind
Shodan?
of a exchange. Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
exchange.
Do you
It's.
know Shodan search engine? Uh,
I'm sorry. Do I know?
Shodan. Do you know Shodan search engine?
I don't.
Search engines.
Yeah, search engines. Yes.
Yeah, it's Shodan. It's called Shodan. Have you heard?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, for
Shodan.
the looking
Yeah,
over the. internet to exposed.
Yeah, let's talk
Okay.
about it for a minute.
Yeah.
I've used Shodan for long, I mean, for many times, for a long time. And I have discovered so many PLCs, HMIs, you name it.
Yeah.
What do you think about those OT devices that are exposed? What's your opinion on that?
I can only say one word. It's stupid. For as long as it's not a honeypot, it's stupid.
Yeah, some of them are not
But
honey.
it happens a lot. It happens a lot,
Yeah,
and I've also played a little bit with it already a
yeah,
long, long time ago. I think
yeah.
probably even 10 years ago, something like that.
All right.
At least long time ago, and I noticed the same things.
Hmm.
I even yeah. No, I don't want to to explain my adventures there, but no, that is stupid. I mean, if
Hmm.
you have an important system, a critical system, it should not be directly exposed to the internet in no way. And you should not be able to recognize it as a PLC.
Hmm.
That's, but
So,
I don't.
yeah.
So
Do you think those systems could be hacked and enter?
any system can be hacked. Any system can be
I
hacked.
mean, those that exposed to the internet, you think they could be? They could pose a risk.
People that have the money, the resources, the time to investigate it, they will find a way.
Hmm.
There is, yeah, you can say my system is secure, but I don't just believe that. Has been said very often, and it's proved very often otherwise.
Hmm. Uh, okay. So I've noticed that you've come to Kuwait a few times. Well,
Many times, many
many
times.
times because I am from Kuwait. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
you told me.
so when was the first time you came to Kuwait?
The very first time I have now to remember was in the 90s. In the 90s, it was when they were still where they were starting to build Equate. The
Oh, okay.
very earliest Equate installations were partly the Dutch organization was involved. I was still doing only process control stuff in those days, and I worked on some of the logic blocks in, in that configuration. And then later on, when they extended, that was in 2007 or something like that, in that period, and they added some plants, and I was again there. And after that, also very often for security.
Hmm.
I worked for KOC. I worked for other companies in
And what was
Kuwait.
your role? Was it what was your role mainly? KOC.
Initially, I was just a process engineer, application engineer,
Okay.
software writing, and say after 2000, it
Hmm.
became network security.
Network security.
Yeah.
Um,
And then the last 10 years, primarily risk.
Risk. You still work with them or not anymore in Kuwait?
No, I don't have any, I don't, how you said it? I haven't banned Kuwait, but I don't have any projects there now.
Okay. What about the Gulf? Have you worked in Saudi,
I
Dubai?
worked in, with the exception of Yemen, I worked in all Gulf
Okay.
regions, from Oman, Saudi Arabia,
Oh,
the Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait.
the whole Gulf
Yeah, yeah,
with Honeywell, right? Or
with Honeywell, yeah.
Honeywell. I mean, I see that Honeywell has a very big share in the Gulf, especially with the oil.
Yeah, I think that's globally.
It's
That's the
global.
that's the Honeywell focus. Yeah,
Uh-huh, okay.
I don't know any more about marketing numbers. I used to have information on that, but I remember at some time Honeywell about 52% of all world refineries were running Honeywell, and yeah, in the Middle East, lots of companies use, but not only. Yeah, I mean, there's also Amazon. There's all.
Why they have bigger share? Is it because they started earlier, or because they have more knowledge, expertise, or what is it? Like from your own opinion.
A little bit both, I guess. Some companies, some of present day competitors actually grew over the years by combining companies and building a bigger company where Honeywell started and always had. Honeywell has a philosophy of
Uh-huh.
what they call continuous evolution. So the new release is always guaranteeing backward compatibility with the old release. And if you do that, you build a very, very big installed base. And Honeywell has, I believe, the biggest installed base of
Mm.
all vendors.
Mhm.
And yeah, then you keep growing because there is, of course, a lot of money involved for an asset owner if they change from one vendor to another.
Yeah.
And you certainly have to modify your control strategy. You have to test a lot of stuff more. So it's very often more easy to migrate than to do a rip and replace. Though that happens too. I mean, but okay, I'm no longer working for Honeywell. I'm not going to make any statements
I
on
get
her.
it.
But I think that's a basic element in their success is this continuous evolution where there's also a handicap, by the way, if you drag on all that technology over years. Some technology that was invented in the mid 70s
Mm.
still exists today. Maybe not as hardware, but then as a virtual controller somewhere in the software form. The old basic controller of TDC 2000, that type of concept still exists in a virtual
I see.
environment. They're kind of exceptional all, but that's just to keep that compatibility
Mm.
that has been always been a very important part of the strategy.
Mm. So we noticed that the OT market vendors or service providers, product providers has increased in the last 4 or 5 years now, but now there is a shrink again. Maybe you agree or not. What's your opinion on the current product services in the OT security?
Yeah, I'm not sure where you're referring to. I think there are a couple of also there. If you look at the main vendors,
Yeah.
main automation vendors, and then apart from Honeywell, you have Schneider, you have ABB,
Mm.
Yokogawa, Rockwell. Uh, but you see Siemens, of course. You see in that environment some companies that actually provide security as a service
Mhm.
to their customers, and then they not exclusively focus on their own equipment, while there are other vendors that see security more in the context of their own system. So they want to have
Mm.
their system to be secure, and the fact that there is other stuff connected, yeah, they see that a little bit out of scope in their world. So that is kind of a split up. And I think that hasn't changed that much in the market. Of course, what we have seen is a lot of new companies entering the market,
Yeah.
trying to to do business because there was a gap in security and well, lack of people. So there was a growing business. But on the other hand, I think that gap is getting smaller and smaller. So the market becomes smaller, and then the vendors probably always have an advantage because they are there anyhow, because they are there for the support of the normal failures and the normal stuff that happens to systems. So yeah, maybe that's the reason why it's getting smaller. I'm not sure. Maybe it's economy. I'm not sure too. I've never looked into that, but I noticed that too. We had a big boom in cyber,
Yeah.
and now we are over the top. And specifically in the US, environment. In
Yes.
North America, it's
Yeah.
big step back. Yeah.
Threat intelligence, IDS,
Yeah.
you name it. Um, okay. There is an issue I always hear that sometimes there is a cybersecurity issue or vulnerabilities in an asset owner. And once you approach them, they tell you that their vendors won't allow them to bring a third party. But the problem is the vendor isn't solving this issue. So what's your view on this?
Well, I talk then now 100% personal, not anything on my history. But vendors have a number of problems. First of all, whenever there is a change in a system, they need to properly test it. The most important thing for any vendor of an automation system is the reliability of a system. So if you start entering new stuff in systems or connecting new stuff in systems, they have the feeling they need to test that it doesn't impact my system. Because that is what happens. If something happens to the system, they always point us first to the vendor, because that's where it pops up.
Mm.
The operator or whatever is the first guy that notices something is wrong, and he notices that through that same system. So that's a reason why they are very reluctant. Another reason, what you mentioned, is the support over time.
Mm.
Yeah, you have to set a limit. You have new releases, and you have limited number of resources in a company, number of money available to support. So you have to say, okay, we can only support so many releases, maybe one, two, or three releases, or maybe more. I don't know. That's a choice. But at a certain point, you have to say, yeah, I cannot no longer support that release. You have to upgrade to a newer release. Of course, you always need to offer a solution,
Mm.
but that's the reason why, yeah, the things change. There's a big change in the world. The moment we started with open systems, we have seen all these changes. I mean, Microsoft makes changes to their releases, and they don't really care about the automation world because that's a very
Yeah.
small part of their world. So when they issue a new release, yeah, also automation vendors need to follow sooner or later, and that has all kind of ripple effect.
Mm.
It makes it very complex. In the old days, when I started, you could do 10, 15 years with a release without any changes
Mm.
because it was proprietary technology. You just replace boards when it failed, and that's it. But that's no longer so. I mean, you have in your system probably a Windows somewhere. You might have Cisco or Hewlett Packard network equipment. They come up with new releases and new equipment. They end sales and support on equipment. So yeah, it's a very dynamic,
Mm.
difficult to handle environment. It's getting better, by the way.
Mm.
Now we see that more and more systems are virtualized.
Yeah.
And when virtualization reduces a little bit this dynamic
Mm.
in the environment, but
Mm.
yeah, that's a high cost factor for customers. It's also certainly a risk factor. Any change is a risk.
Okay. So you think virtuality is now making things, and cloud maybe making things
Yeah, yeah,
easier than before, huh?
yeah. Cloud. I see cloud as a kind of an extension of the virtual environment,
Mm.
but then cloud as initially as a local kind of a local cloud, a private cloud. Not necessarily all on the internet. Some applications certainly, but others, yeah, not necessarily,
Mhm.
because that also often creates risk. But there are today even plants
Mm.
that fully run from the cloud. That exists. On my age, then I really think, is that a wise thing to do? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's all business in the end. Eh?
Yeah.
It's a business decision on risk, and if it pays them off financially, then yeah, it's a good decision.
Yeah.
But I would not start controlling a nuclear plant from the cloud today.
I see. I see. Uh, one of my episodes with a friend of mine last time we talked about using open source in OT for an asset owner. What's your view on using open source products?
That's totally out of my view, basically, because Honeywell, of course,
Yeah.
didn't use that so much. But open source is fine in the sense that you know what you get. But the problem of that is that both sides know what you have. Both the attacker and you as the defender
Mm.
know how things look. And open source has not been a guarantee always that it's secure. Eh? We have also seen some incidents, I believe, in Unix where people were actually manipulating the
Yeah.
code
True.
in their contributions to make vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a big issue. So I think we've covered most of the points I wanted to talk with.
yeah, fine. Well,
It's been now an hour now. Thank you for your patience and for your time.
no, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
and
for inviting me.
it's my pleasure. And thank you for accepting my invitation and sharing your expertise.
Yeah, fine.
I really enjoyed walking the history with you about since the 80s until now. It's nice to see this change, you
Yeah,
know.
you need old guests for that. Yeah.
So you think the OT is improving than it used to, from your
Oh,
opinion?
sure, sure. If I follow the news, then very often it's a very negative attitude.
Hmm.
While if you if you've worked in that industry, you have seen major steps forward.
Hmm.
There are a lot of companies that have made major investments improving their security.
Mhm.
And of course, it's never 100%. Even if you have spent a lot of money on securing it, you can still not say it's a secure system. Yeah, that remains a difficult position, but it's better, a lot better than, well, say 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Major steps forward.
I agree. Fully agree.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
that remains so. I mean, another topic we didn't address in the discussion, but you see a lot of criticism on field equipment not being secure.
yeah.
Yeah, for me, security and vulnerability also has to do something with exposure. You know,
Mhm.
something can be vulnerable, but if it's not exposed, I don't have a problem.
Mm.
But if it's vulnerable and exposed, yeah, then I have a problem. And field equipment is very often limited exposed. You look at in plants, a very large percentage of the field equipment is directly connected to the controllers or the PLCs, to the I/O boards of those I/O cards. And then they are not really exposed. Then you first have to attack the controller or the PLC to get to the field instrument.
Mm.
Well, when you've succeeded in attacking a controller or a PLC, you don't really care anymore about the field instrument. You already have what you need, even more. You have multiple field instruments under your control at that point in time. So
Mm.
I don't see that as that type of thing as a big issue.
So by saying exposed, do you mean exposed to the internet?
Exposed to the attacker. That
How did
doesn't
the attacker?
necessarily need to be internet.
Mm.
That yeah, exposed to if I connect the field transmitter to
Mm.
the network, to the process network, it's more exposed than if I connect it to the controller.
Okay.
Because if you are an attacker, you are much more happy to gain control over that controller than over that single transmitter. Yeah, so it really becomes less of a problem at that point in time.
Nice. Okay, got it. Thank you, Sinclair.
Have a nice day.
You
You have
too.
a nice day off, and a bit disappointed that it's cold in Kuwait,
Yeah, it is cold now in December, right?
but okay.
What about you? Is it holiday for you today, or you have work?
No, I have work on the book, and
Okay.
I do all kind of stupid things that you have to do to stay alive, shopping and so on.
I get it. I get it. Thank you. You have a good time, and thank you for joining ICS Arabia podcast.
Okay. Yeah,
Have a good
thank you.
time.
Nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.